Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Mobile Technology Spotlight podcast series. Sponsored by Samsung Electronics of America, Samsung is committed to supporting public safety and helping first responders use technology as a force multiplier. I'm Dale Stockton, and today we've got two guests, both from Samsung, who are going to share some unique insights on the use of mobile devices by public safety and some of the trends they're seeing around the country. Todd Maxwell is the Director Government Business Development, and Keith Redlin is the Director of Public Sector and Safety. Both these guys have a great background in public safety, and we're really glad they're with us today. So welcome, guys. Todd, why don't you kick us off with a little bit about your job and your experience?
Sure. I have been recruited to come over to Samsung and start up their public safety division and have sort of transitioned into this director of business development role. But my passion has always been building up solutions and solving problems for first responders, and that's the passion I've carried over. Prior to coming over here, I was at Booz Allen Hamilton, who's a federal contractor, and I was on site with DOJ and doing similar work. I was advising them on technology for state and local law enforcement, first responders, and stood up their body-worn camera toolkit and grant program and worked with a lot of agencies as we formed that policy and best practices. And I joined them from a public safety software company. So again, working in the public safety space, had implemented several strategic sites, federal, state, and local, even some international sites and some DoD sites with computer-aided dispatch records management. Like really got my start in doing probation parole, and we got a statewide RMS system, and they needed a trainer, and I did pretty well at picking it up and started training people, and that's what really sort of gave me the access to going on to be starting as a trainer in a software company and working to where I'm at now. So have enjoyed it, like the practitioner feel, and have really enjoyed helping solve problems and bring some tools to our first responders out there.
That's great. Keith, same question, a bit about what your job entails.
Hey, Dale, thanks. Longtime listener, first-time caller from me. So thank you. Happy holidays to those listeners and to your team as well. I'll tell you, here at Samsung, my role is to manage a team that outreaches to the public safety community. So we have a few folks on my team, including education, that reaches out to public safety, first responders, and talking with them, evangelizing around how can they use mobile to do their job first. And so we'll get into that a little bit later, but yeah, thanks for having me.
I appreciate that. And Keith, I noticed from your LinkedIn page, and I know a little bit about you, you spend some time in uniform. Tell us about that.
Yes, actually, I'm currently attached to our Technology Information and Innovation Division, actually Oakland County Sheriff Department here in Michigan. My role as a sergeant is to lead a team that looks out forward to different innovations, but I'm also on another task force that focuses on search and rescue and fugitive apprehension. So I touch a little bit of everything in my particular division there. It's really a part-time role for me as my career has pivoted pretty much away from full-time law enforcement, but now focused in on technology. And just sometimes I just have to pinch myself. Working at Samsung, I get to do best of both worlds. My wife knows I'm a gadget geek, so I love all this technology, but more importantly is how do we take that technology, make it useful for police officers in the field? Because, no offense to some of our listeners, they have a mission to do, and sometimes they're not as technically astute as one would be. We give them this laptop, and have you ever seen the front of the police car, right? It's got all this tech, but they're limited sometimes into how to use everything. So my job is to try to make that simple and bring them some tools that they use every single day, like their smartphone, and bring that into a practical environment for law enforcement. So, yep, that's my background in wearing the badge.
That's great. I love that you've got a practitioner perspective. That's good for everybody. So, Todd, take us kind of a global perspective, if you would. The use of mobile devices, primarily smartphones, of course, but mobile in general, in public safety by first responders. You've got to be seeing some trends out there, considering all the agencies you work with. What is it you're seeing that you can share with the audience?
Yeah, so part of the job that I do with business development is consulting and talking to our global sister agencies and seeing what they're doing, what's working well for them in their countries or on their continent, and then taking some of that, sharing what we're doing here. So we get sort of a really good best practices across the globe, which is something great that the Samsung allows us to do. And some of the things, when mobile phones first got introduced, it was basically for text messaging, for emails and phone calls, right? And then it became like a single purpose device. It was adding body worn cameras, as I was mentioning before, and being a conduit for passing that video to the cloud server, or to tagging and editing that, or doing e-citations right from a phone. And what we're starting to see now is them tying in multiple technologies, right? Usually the software lags behind some of the hardware and technology. You've heard of maybe Samsung DeX, where your phone can be your laptop. And what that ends up meaning is not only can you do your e-citation, but you can do your computer-aided dispatch, you can do your records management, you can do your field reports, you can tie it into your body camera and your in-car video and LPR systems, tie in multiple things. And when you start looking at all these different use cases and consolidation of tools onto a single device, you start looking at the cost savings and how agencies can move their mobility program, and how they can start one with a single purpose of maybe replacing or adding body cameras and adding mobility, but then getting to the ultimate where they're replacing all sorts of tools and saving their IT and their agency money. And that's where we're starting to see some trends moving towards. But we're also starting to see additional use cases of how people are looking at landlines differently. Traditionally, you'd call a landline, and if you need an officer, they would relay the message, and then they'd call you back, and they'd hide their number from their mobile device or from a landline. But now you can, with the carriers, you can have those direct numbers come to the mobile phones. So there's even more stuff in how people interact with the court systems and do hearings mobilely through things like WebEx or Zoom or other proprietary type interactions. And we see a lot more mobility. And we introduced some really cool things back in the day with our wearable platform, created the world's first computer-aided dispatch where you could answer calls from a wearable. But we sort of introduced it way before its time, and people just weren't ready for it. There's a lot of questions about privacy. It was an extra cost savings, nice to have, not need to have. But as we add more and more sensors, we can look if this, then that. If you're walking, if you're all of a sudden in a court pursuit, automatically notifying dispatch and getting help to you sooner. You're in distress, giving you a notification that you might need to work on your stress levels, or if you're dehydrated, and tying in notifications on that, drink some water. We start looking at how this can come into a situational awareness map, so you can manage your assets, and we start looking at how we can do that not only over LTE with our wearables, but then for our phones and our tablets, how we can do it over P25, LMR networks, and over satellite. So you have this continuous situational awareness, and you can have aerial units, ground units, everybody coordinating. So there's a lot of new tech and how this mobility is really sort of taking off. And it's been really interesting to see how the cost savings and how the management, the OS updates are coming from the cloud instead of having to be touched each time. So we have this trend where mobility is becoming more and more the forefront. And whether, what the one thing we can push for is app parity. It doesn't really matter. Just get that parity so the platform and the software works the same no matter whether it's, Android, iOS, or Windows. And then the end user can decide what platform works for them. But we've really sort of just, like I said, seen this trend towards mobility, the more things they can do with the device, getting more bang for the buck, being a force multiplier. And now we've seen some expanding how they communicate, whether it's LTE or P25 or satellite or private 5G networks, and then introducing of some of these IoT devices beyond just wearables too, for monitoring different solutions and integrating to the drones and all these different types of technologies. It's becoming a more interesting space and offering a lot more tools. If you think about coming from pen and paper a mere 20 years ago to where we're at now with technology for law enforcement, I'm just really proud of the tools that we've been able to give to law enforcement and firefighters and first responders, even on the federal side. And I'm just looking forward to solving some more problems, like some of the wildland fire issues, and using this tech to solve some real world problems.
Wow, you covered a lot of ground. Keith, let's take it down to a single use case, if you would, an agency that's really getting it when it comes to embracing mobile. And you guys call it the one device, many uses approach, but the sheer utility smartphones can deliver. Could you give us a good use case, an agency you've worked with?
Yeah, definitely. Just to tag on, if I could, about what Todd had shared, there's so much that can be done. You're really just limited to your imagination and the mission in which you want to accomplish. So, Todd had covered everything from wearables to location to computer-aided dispatch, and just really covered everything that a law enforcement agency would probably want to do in a mobile environment. And the good news there is that some of these agencies have challenged us and tested us and said, hey, can you actually do these things? And to the credit of my partner, Todd, here, we've seen that paradigm shift. And in one specific case, I do like to reference Chicago Police Department because, they are the second largest agency in our country. They're huge. They're spread out, multiple precincts around their city. And what they were challenged with doing is taking their computer-aided dispatch, their entire environment, their records management, and all of the tools that they use, including, the common things like texting and voice calling, and bring that back into their IT shop so they can then deploy what was originally one handset per every patrol vehicle. And then that rapidly grew to one handset per every officer that's in the patrol division. And what that allowed them to do is accomplish a few missions. One, all their app stack became realized Android operating system with Samsung. They were able to ruggedize it with partners that we had established and created through our friends at Havas. We were able to get the software stack working through their contracted relationships with Central Square. We were able to show them that they can rapidly deploy these things, and most important, manage these things, these devices seamlessly through our Knox managed system. What your listeners should really understand and know is that we have the experience at the most highest level, and many other small agencies as well out there, to take their vision to go mobile. And we have that user experience over the last 5 years to really understand the gaps, challenges. And when we go in and consult, we can see, like, for instance, Chicago has everything now in their mobile environment. So really, that's one that I would love to highlight.
That is actually a really nice segue because I'm going to go to the other extreme. As you mentioned, Chicago's the second largest agency in the country. Well, one of the smaller ones is Monroe County Sheriff in Missouri. They've got a grand total of 10 folks, including the sheriff, Joe Colston. And I think both of you guys know he's a big proponent of DEX. Todd mentioned that earlier when he was talking about trends. Could one of you give the background of DEX, how it came about, and the way it's being used by public safety agencies today? Maybe even go into where it's going next, if you would.
So, Todd, if you wouldn't mind, I'll take the first half of that question. And DEX, to your listener group, means desktop experience. Originally, this feature of our mobile devices are S-Series 9 and newer. So when I say S-Series 9, we go back to 2018. We've been doing this. Essentially, it allows an end user to plug in a cable, a USB-C, that you can then put a router of some sort or a mini hub, and allows you to have your traditional accessories like keyboard, mouse, and also external video as well. So you can attach this to a rugged video device like a Havas unit, or even your TV in your hotel room if you're a road traveler. But really what the concept here is, what can we do to make sure that in the law enforcement community, they can use their mobile device, whether they're in the car, on foot, they can easily disconnect this device, and or as we most of us realize and know, 80% of law enforcement is sitting there doing report writing. It's not as fun as just chasing bad guys, right? So it also works nicely in the office environment, the report writing area as well. So Todd, if you could take it away from me on the where's DEX going?
Sure. So it's something funny. Keith was mentioning Chicago, and back in the day, if you would have told me that you had two directors of Samsung, top 5 global tech innovative company, sitting on the fleet floor, taking wires and helping get this DEX program, I would have laughed. But we believed in that solution and had a great partner in Chicago, and we're helping them forge and working with Havas at the time and bending metal and making sure everything worked for our first pilot units to get everything perfectly working. And it was a great experience. It was a great partner.
Todd, that was a blast. I mean, we got the pictures to prove it too.
Yeah, and the Dex lab they have of all the iteration is almost like a museum that we should go up there and chronicle. But yeah, so as we introduced Dex, right? Dex came about. It was a consumer that we launched in I think 2017 on the S8 and then on our Tab S4. And it's come a long ways because we introduced it as a consumer side. Police, law enforcement actually asked us about taking it. I think it was Atlanta PD had asked us about taking it to help them with the cost of rugged MDTs and recruitment of younger officers that were coming in and were more used to utilizing a mobile phone than an MDT. So it really sort of got born out of that. And as we've introduced different features, we started adding features for configuring the phone and the Dex environment differently because it changes, right? How you interact with it. It goes from the phone screen that is in more of a portrait mode into a horizontal landscape mode where you interact with it with a keyboard and mouse or even touchscreen if you happen to have touchscreen. We've had different features there where we could have some functionality to make it more like a desktop experience where you have key features or keyboard shortcuts. We've added the ability because of how cars have trended towards having in-car dash to looking at some of the times those are in portrait mode. So we've changed Dex from horizontal to give it an offer of going in portrait mode. So it'll fit in those in vehicles. We've looked at incorporating that directly into the vehicles, which has been a request moving forward. We've also looked at doing dual monitor as being one of the big requirements for several agencies that like that dual monitor. We had one agency that said they didn't need it. It was really interesting because they just had a big 42-inch monitor and with Dex, they had 4 windows open and people didn't realize you could split up the screen and really have that same power that you expect. Have 4 different apps running and the screen split into 4 different ways. So we've done a lot of different features in that. We've worked with our partners to bring advancements. One of the trends I was telling you about earlier around doing remote court hearings, we really worked with some agencies and some of our partners to look at incorporating cameras and microphones into the displays or the monitors. So therefore, if they happen to be in a car, they could more easily access that because sometimes the phone is mounted either on the body or on the side. So you'd have a direct place to interface. When we started, we had external hubs, and now those hubs for the USB-C are all incorporated into the monitors. So a lot of advancements on the software side. We've had a lot of partners that have come from not having any Android applications to building Android applications to building Dex optimization. We're starting to see a lot of our key features that we've put into Dex be incorporated. And they say that mimicry is the best form of flattery. We see a lot of people adopting something that we started, some of our competition. So that's always great, but we're going to keep pushing it and incorporating new features. We have some new stuff coming up. I can't really too much into because it hasn't launched yet, but you're going to see some cool new features and how you interact is going to be smoother. It used to be like a 10-second pause to launching it, now it's almost immediate. And if you try any of our new tablets, as soon as you put on a keyboard, it goes directly into Dex mode. So a lot more smooth transition and how we interact with our entire ecosystem from phones to wearables to TVs and monitors and automatically being able to recognize and launch into modes without having to click. Some really cool things that I think that you'll start seeing in the Dex mode and the compatibility as we move forward.
That's great. And I love the cost effectiveness of what you guys are bringing about with the mobile. So, Keith, I'm going to turn to you for this one because you're spending time in the field and you see the impact of the other big challenge in public safety right now, besides budgets, and that's staffing. Every agency we hear about is so far understaffed. It's just incredible. So the concept of going mobile can, in many people's view, offset that a little bit, force multiplier. Would you address that from a uniform perspective, from a manager perspective?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question, by the way. And one of the things I'm hearing, and it's, I would say multiple times from law enforcement IT leaders and state leaders, and they all say the same thing, which is funny. And they said, government, they really don't want to innovate unless they have to. Sometimes that means they're at the very end of an innovation cycle, or maybe something new that's coming into this space. Whereas this type of technology, smartphone and desktop experience, all of those cool terms really allows an agency to adapt quickly. And here's why. One is the cost, but I'll get to that in a second. Number two is your staff. So that we see the paradigm shift of officers and deputies going from, not to pick on anybody here from their technical capability and their age, but you see folks like myself in their 50s moving out of this field. We have a new younger generation coming into it. And the one thing that they can gravitate to is tech, right? They understand that the guys going into this profession and ladies going into this profession today have started using mobile handhelds as a child. So they know that. It's inherent. It's kind of like, knowing how to ride your bike. So what this has allowed agencies to do in a couple areas in the cost savings. One, it's more cost affordable to deploy. You're moving from that capital expenditure of equipment, managing that for a 7-year life cycle. Now you're on an OpEx model where your carriers are subsidizing the devices for you. So essentially you're walking away with a Samsung equipped handset at no cost to you from that standpoint. You now have a monthly reoccurring charge, but with that monthly recurring charge, you can add your MDM cost to it, so your mobile device manager, to get you CJIS compliant. So now you have a scalable, manageable, fixed cost, if you will, per officer or deputy that you can now foresee and manage. What this has done is lowered the cost of ownership for in-car compute and in-station compute from a 4-to-1 ratio. What does that mean, 4-to-1? It means imagine doing 4 police cruisers for the price of 1 Samsung DeX solution, or multiple in-compute stations in your police agency, a 6-to-1 ratio inside your police agency for 1 smartphone set up through Samsung DeX. Now that revenues that you end up saving in a way or reallocating will go things to special events, manpower, all the things that agencies are struggling to find budget for, and in some cases, even build headcount into the program. So we've seen some agencies say, you know what, now we can afford to do these particular projects in one case, or even hire new people because now they can receive that savings. This is a significant thing. I'd say the hard cost, soft cost weighs out very quickly to an agency looking to consider to do this. And Samsung has put some of this to use as a tool for agencies wanting to learn more about this. We've actually put together calculators. We'll come out and do workshops with them to see really what this looks like for these agencies. But that's a great question. I mean, when you say cost savings, Dale, it can mean many things, but I also look at it as a recruitment opportunity. You're keeping people longer. Morale can also affect your cost if you have new troops coming and going. It's multifaceted.
All right, let's go a different direction for a little bit. So public safety's got a reputation, cops especially, of being pretty tough on equipment. So what are you seeing regarding agencies choosing to use a rugged phone like the Xcover 6 Pro, or instead putting a flagship phone in a rugged case? What's the trend, if you will?
I'll handle this one, Keith, and chime in. We have a public safety advisory council that we've utilized and gotten feedback from on our rugged series as we started introducing them for the same reasons you just mentioned on how they can be tough on devices. And we first introduced our Xcover Pro several years ago, and then we started looking at key features on it when we were going to release the Xcover 6. And some of the features they gave us feedback on as they wanted DeX and dedicated features on it, and a better camera for using the devices as body-worn cameras and evidence collection. And we weren't sure we were going to get all that when we had put it up to our development team. So we had a lot of people that were utilizing our flagships because of that, but we, luckily enough, got all those features into the device. So now it really just comes down to, we have some agencies are utilizing the rugged device. They like that. They don't have to put a case on it. Others have gotten into the habit of always putting cases on devices. So it really doesn't seem to matter on the device. It's more around the use case and what software they're running. So if they are running like a body camera, or using our device as a body camera, we've seen them lean more towards the Xcover 6 Pro. If they are utilizing it for DeX or DeX vehicle, we've seen more of a trend towards a flagship phone like our S22, S23 lineup with a case. So It's been interesting. If they're doing push to talk, we introduced the ability to do a side key mapping on our flagship, like our S22, S23, to cover it, similar to what you have on the Xcover 6 Pro. So we've given them the choice. They can run DeX on either, they can run push to talk on either. So they have similar battery life and processors. Now, the flagship might have a little bit better camera, and while the hard one is a little bit more rugged. So if you're going into a place where you need higher temperatures or lower temperatures, that one will have a better operating range. If you need to switch out the battery, you have that option too. So it's really because of all the feedback we've gotten from our advisory council and our end users and partners, the devices have a lot of parity. So really it comes down to what their use case is. Like if they're going to be out in the desert or fighting fires, they might want the rugged one for the more range. If you're really in a cold environment, you might utilize it for that, or a really wet environment.
I just wanted to add to that too, Todd. You're all good points. Here's the bottom line, right? And I'll let listeners do the research if they want to. There is no device on the market right now that's rugged like our Xcover 6 Pro and does DeX, has hot swappable batteries, and built-in push-to-talk function. So when I look at this is a Swiss Army Ninja device that's going to get us through the mission that you guys are looking at completing. And, Todd hit it. Every single use case, you got to try to find what device is just right for that. But I'll tell you, even if you step out of that Xcover Pro, like Todd had mentioned, we have the ability to take a over-the-counter phone, ruggedize that through our partners, our best in the industry in a case, and remap those buttons and launch your mission. So there's nothing else out in the market that does that today, and that's where we lead.
All right. Let's begin to wind this down. Any recommendations or words of wisdom for those decision makers that may be on the bubble and they're looking at a major, perhaps a full deployment or a major expansion of what they've got in place with just a few phones? How do they best justify this?
I'll kick off real quick, and I know Todd will jump in as well. Todd, I'd love for you to cover the different shows and the different events that we go to where you speak and we have a relevant presence there. But I will tell you, to your listeners, here's what I want you to learn. When you're sitting down looking at a mobile program, reach out to those who have already launched one. There's a lot of lessons to be learned by your colleagues in different agencies. We have a list of some of those. If you wish to speak with one of my team members or someone else that we've supported along this journey, there's a lot to learn out there. Number two, your RFP process, your RFP and your RFI are so important because those are vehicles that leverage your voice to the supplier community. What I mean by that is if your records management system or your computer-aided dispatch system says, hey, listen, we just don't have that mobile capability yet. It's coming one day. When you put that in the RFP, you're putting your a line in the sand to say, we want this, and this might be a decision-making element as to how we look at deploying mobile. So when you do that, you also want to do that in a way that it's ubiquitous, right? You can use it in a Windows, iOS, Android, Samsung environment. I'm not saying one way or another. I'm just saying that you want to do it so you have the leverage and capability to leverage all platforms for your agency. Don't pigeonhole your agency into one operating platform because as you've learned on this call today, through Samsung Mobility and Samsung Public Sector, we can literally touch everything from your edge users to search and rescue to situational awareness, push to talk. So you want all those features baked into your mobile RFP, RFI. Todd, do you want to share about where they can find us out in the field too?
Well, yeah, but let me come back because, some of the other things, it is always great to talk to end users and, hear it through the grapevine on what we're doing. But I would add that we've tried to make that a little easy. We've compiled a lot of voice of customer and some white papers we've written. They're available on our Samsung Public Safety website. There's also some videos from customers talking about it. So if you're trying to figure out who to talk to, or if you want a guide essentially on how you would even start a mobility program, what are the questions I might have about CGIS compliance, how could I start a situational awareness program, what is DEX? We have the entire white papers if you want to know about the cost savings of implementing something paired against your operating and capital expenditures. We have those white papers too. and some of the people on this call participated and helped write those. So those are a vast opportunity of resources too. So I want to add that in there. I believe there was a question about some upcoming events or shows. We have lots of events that we participate in. We try to go where the end users are. We are always participating in whether it's federal, state, and local, trying to support those missions. So we have a SHOT Show where we'll be showcasing some of our situational awareness in Vegas in January, running situational awareness over P25 and satellite, integrating to all sorts of different endpoints. We also have IWCE coming up in Orlando, where we're going to be talking about all sorts of innovative things that we're doing for domestic violence witness protection using IoT, and what we're doing with DEX and also situational awareness. And then, you'll catch us at the bigger shows, and even on the federal side at Border Security Expo and AFCEA and AUSA, whether it's military, state, local, federal. There's a lot of the same crossover when it comes to situational awareness or DEX or human performance and training. So a lot of the same solutions. So if you ever see our names, make sure you come by and talk to us and ask more about what we're doing.
Excellent. Well, you mentioned the papers and other resources. We'll get links for the audience in the show notes. And that will bring us to a close for today. I really want to thank both you guys. You bring so much to the table, and you're really helping first responders across the country leverage tech effectively. Audience, thank you. Today's episode of Mobile Technology Spotlight has been sponsored by Samsung Electronics of America and proudly presented by Public Safety Insight. Stay safe out there, everyone.